to talk to you about this morning is housing. We had hoped to speak to your colleague, the Housing Secretary. That's not been possible. So thank you for joining us to discuss this. We've just had the housing bill pass at Holyrood, some reforms to tenants' rights, proposals brought in to create rent control zones in some parts of the country, and measures to tackle homelessness as well. But your critics have pointed out that this legislation does not build one single new home. You are committed to a target of 110,000 homes by 2032. How realistic is that?
Well, it is realistic, and if you look at what we've already delivered, we've delivered 140,000 affordable homes since 2007. 100,000 of those are for social rent. So we have a track record, and that outstrips way beyond anything delivered anywhere else in these islands by any other government. So we have a track record of delivery of affordable homes. And of course, Mary McCallan, the Housing Secretary, announced up to £4.9 billion investment over the next few years in order to keep that momentum going. Now, that is against a background, of course, Lindsay, where housing costs have increased, and construction costs, supply chains, the interest rates that are now making borrowing far more expensive than it was.
We've just been hearing from the sector that they don't think that money is nearly enough. It's not going to provide the housing that Scotland needs. They were talking about over £8 billion of investment needed.
Well, that up to 4.9 billion, of course, will stimulate investment elsewhere. So, of course, the Register of Social Landlords and councils also borrow, and we will have mid-market rent. And the important change to the housing bill on rent controls will incentivise and encourage those builders to come in and build mid-market rent, all of which counts towards the affordable housing target. So, this will give certainty to the sector, and of course, the sector tells us all the time that one of the most important things is that line of sight of capital investment, because it gives them confidence to be able to build homes, to plan them, and to lever in additional investment. And of course, the issues around planning are also something that Mary McCallan is looking at to make sure that where there are stalled sites, that we can break through those.
That's affordable housing. What do you think needs to be done to encourage more investment into social housing?
Well, of course, that social housing is a key part of affordable housing, and 100,000 out of the 140,000 built so far have been for social rent. And that line of sight of investment will encourage registered social landlords and local authorities to plan their investment using that money, but also leveraging in additional money on top of that to be able to plan over a number of years the investment that will help us to get to that target. And of course, the target is a 2032 target, so it goes beyond the £4.9 billion. So there will be additional funding on top of that for that remaining part of the programme.
I wanted to ask you as well about the rent control zones, the rent caps. Much debate over that during the passing of this legislation. I wonder how likely you think it is that rent caps will actually be recommended and put in place in Scotland, given that we've had the legislation for these rent pressure zones in the past, and councils feel they have not been able to use them.
Well, I think we've learned some of the lessons around not making it overly complicated, but obviously that will be a discussion for local authorities, and they will only be used where it's appropriate for them to be used. And of course, we have a very diverse housing market in Scotland. Some areas are very, very different in terms of the level of rents compared to others. So it is a tool that is in the housing bill that is an appropriate tool in order to address those areas where those rents are particularly high and impact on people being able to access the housing market in their area for particularly private the private rented sector. So, the housing bill does a number of things that are important, particularly the prevention. And that is one of the best ways, of course, to ensure that people do not end up in a homeless situation.
Just finally, we asked very briefly, we asked Richard Meade about your priorities for the budget. He said if you're serious about tackling child poverty, you need to do much more on housing. Can we expect the housing budget to be increased in the budget in January?
Well, we already have increased that up to £4.9 billion. It has been a significant increase. And of course, there are other measures we're taking. This, of course, Scotland is the only part of the UK where child poverty rates are falling. So the investment we're making in a number of areas, including housing, have led to Scotland being the only part of the UK where child poverty rates are falling. There's more work to do, Lindsay. We absolutely accept that.
We'll have to leave it